Well, hello, hello. It is Sarah Jane from Access Your True Nature with your Truth Bomb Tuesday. Unfortunately, Cara couldn't be with us today as she has a daughter who's sick and that she's tending to. So just sending love and healing energy out to anybody else who is perhaps feeling a little under the weather right now. And my daughter also has been home for the last 2 days with some kind of strep throat. And we've been exploring the power of the sacred pause. And what I wanted to share with you today, which came through from the ancient wisdom of chameleon. And if any of you have ever seen a chameleon, I grew up in Zimbabwe, and I remember befriending many a beautiful chameleon in our backyard. In those days, there were many of them. Sadly, today, encroaching on their natural habitat. I don't see them very much, not like that. But we're really going to draw on the medicine of chameleon today. If you've ever watched them, you notice that they move very, very slowly, and they really know how to hold their body in the sacred pause, and can teach us so much about patience and persistence, and that the wisdom of it can really guide us in our own busy lives. Because as we sort of go through into the last 90 days of 2018, I'm certainly feeling that intensity of looking back on the year and seeing just how far I've come, and yet how much I still have to do. And so many of my own clients, just realizing that when we get overwhelmed, when we're trying to pack too much activity into our lives, and there's no sacred pause, there's no space for the universal flow of wisdom and love and creativity to move through us. And just how important it is not just to pause, but to take rest and to appreciate that our bodies need sleep in order to heal themselves, because it's the only time that we get our judgment out of the way and our minds out of the way, so that our bodies can actually get on with the healing through their own innate intelligence. And I think that, there's probably a lot of reasons that you may be finding are coming up in your life where you just feel like you can't take a breath, you can't relax, you can't push pause on the world. And I say this all the time. So if you can relate to kind of feeling that there's just too much to do to take a pause, then this video today is for you. But I want to look at two of the main reasons why I think so many people feel like they're forced into busyness, right? That we're human beings rather than human doings, and that we live in a culture that rewards doing rather than being, because oftentimes you can't see the subtle shifts and the progress that you're making because it's under the surface. It hasn't fully actualized or realized yet. And it makes it very hard to pause if we're just completely habituated into an activity doing. It's just our of an insane asylum that we're all committed to. Nobody knows it, called planet Earth. Or, as I've said, we're in this sort of automatic response, that robotic rebellion of doing as like a trance-like state that we feel like we can't stop. Or perhaps you feel like if you stop, that you'll never be able to get going again because you're so exhausted. And just as I do, that we often forget that there's a time and a season for everything. There's a time for rest, there's a time for harvest, there is a time for upping the momentum and really doing things. But but that our body and our nervous system is designed to go up and go down and go up and go down. And we've forgotten to come down again, right? Because we're on automatic all the time. And as much as it becomes a habit to do, I think that much of that doing is driven by our reptilian brain that keeps saying to us, something's wrong. I need to do something so that I'm ready for what's coming up, or I need to prepare myself, or something's missing. I need to do stuff so that I can make sure I get it. And I'm sure that if you're part of my tribe, that it's often in those moments of pushing pause, of inner stillness, when we're being totally present, walking our dog, or totally present in washing the dishes, that we can just drop down and feel everything. And I know that certainly doing is a way to avoid feeling the intensity of the pain and the grief that we're all feeling around the state of the earth that is really calling us to heal our own brokenness. And I think that we're driven a lot, as I said, by these primitive urges, right? The primitive parts of our brain and our wiring of our nervous system. So it's very difficult to pause for a lot of us, because those driven doings at least give us a sense of controlling things, even though it's not real. There's a sense of I have some semblance of control over what I'm creating in my life. And when we're in a healthy relationship with that, yes, that primal reptilian brain, that survival instinct, is how we manage threats. And we go for advantages by then taking aligned action, rather than doing for the sake of distraction, right? Of avoiding pain, or avoiding that we're being called to do something, or maybe that we're being called to just stop. And the reality is that there are threats to avoid and advantages to go after all the time. There's always going to be infinite opportunities and possibilities. And we need to respond in a very sensitive way and be active in our lives at the same time. And the problem, I think, is that we get so hooked on that. We get hooked on thinking that there's always something that we need that's missing, right? Or that we're going to be left behind, right? That fear of missing out, or that fear of not being validated or not making a difference in the world. So we get locked into that incessant doing, and there's just no breathing room, right? There's no liminal space for creation to come through you, because you're quiet enough to hear that subtle wise woman or wise man within who's saying, go there, not now, but then. And just the same way that a fire needs air and space to burn brightly for our lives to burn brightly, as this light, this illuminator that you are, you also need some spaces in between, right? That liminal space, the breathing room, the sacred pause. We all know it. We need to sleep in order to physically have our full health and our vitality. And we also need to mentally and emotionally pause. We have to stop the incessant narrative, the stories that are constantly going on in our mind from our ego's point of view, to make us right, to have a space or a deeper kind of wisdom can move through us. And I always say I'd rather be wrong and free than right and having to defend my point of view. It's about looking in that sacred pause for where am I draining my energy on things that I have no power over, that I have no control over, and allowing other people to make the choices that they're making. And I think that this is where the training, right? We're all in training. It's a practice. It is mastery that only comes through consistently practicing. And it always starts with setting the intention, right? Setting the intention to see if we can pause more. It's a really good place to start. And you can do this through meditation, and you can also do this throughout the day. I love the Pomodoro technique. And there's lots of apps these days like Calm or Breathe or Pomodoro, where you can set your timer for 20 minutes, or a gong that reminds you to just push pause on the world and breathe or move or stretch during the day. And I'm just saying to you right now, I'm inviting you in to just taking a 20-second pause and asking, who are you? Who are you being? And connecting with that inner stillness to define who you are. Because when you do that, you strengthen on the inside into that being state. That's the reconnection, and something that so many of you are saying, that you just want a sense of belonging. And that is sovereignty, right? Being sovereign to yourself is being able to stand up and choose to push pause. Stand up and say, I'm choosing this. Especially when there's a lot of reactivity going around you, or there's a lot of stress at the moment. That's when we really can acknowledge and appreciate the training when you're not stressed, when to start to practice this when you are in a relaxed state. And something that I always tell my clients that learn how to do the trust process with their animals is to always start off when they're in a relaxed, calm place, before you start trying to work the trust process with them when they're reactive or stressed out for us. So this is the heart of it today on Truth Bomb Tuesday, is to get really truthful and ask the question from your deep down spidey senses, from your intuitive wise woman within, is to ask, who am I being in this moment? The challenge in pausing is that when we pause, and when I say pause, I mean stop goal-oriented activities and multitasking and doing this and that and 100 other things until your head hits the pillow at night, and then not being able to sleep, which was a common pattern for me. To stop myself from really feeling the intensity of what happened during my day, which oftentimes is painful. It is intense because I work with animals and people that are in pain, that are in a state of dis-ease, whether that's physical pain or chronic disease or an emotional or mental pattern of addiction. So, the first step in this is to just set the intention that you're going to stop, push pause on the world, because it's going to create a space for you to feel the vulnerability that's there, for what wants to come through and speak to you, whether that's a body part or deepening into your relationship with your animals, or with the bigger affairs of the heart in our deep concern for what's going on in the world. But we have to be willing to feel that sort of vibration of hypervigilance and anxiety that is part of our organism and make peace with that. And then we can find that space that life can live through. And don't take my word for it. Try it for yourself. Because when you deepen your commitment to push pause on the world, everything starts to change. So treat it as another experiment, and be willing for it to be whatever it is, whether it's messy or not. And just notice when you just stop in the middle of doing things, how the incredible push to regroup and get back into action will really present itself to you, because there's always an anxiety or a restlessness in us. So instead of pausing when we're stressed, we do the exact opposite. We get even more busy and more chaotic and more crazy, because that reptilian brain is driving us inactivity to defend ourselves. And a lot of times it's irrational defense because it doesn't even exist. It's a creation of your mind to hold on to what you think you need from the mental, from the ego, from the supermind. So we end up being overly engaged with doing that actually causes harm and affects our health, and locks us into this perpetuating cycle of busyness, and takes us away from being able to appreciate and enjoy the simple pleasures and the simple things that we lose sight of to appreciate. And remember, what you appreciate appreciates. And when you're doing, underneath that, I want you to get really curious to look at the feeling of the self, the part of you that is driving that behavior, that's driving that busyness. Because it may not be the grown-up you. It might be the fragmented part of you that is pre-7-year-old, that was perhaps felt loved or connected or belonged to their family, because when you were being the good girl, or you were doing chores without being asked to, that you got love. So get curious about what's underneath the feeling of wanting to distract yourself from busyness, and look at what is it that you're avoiding for fear that it'll be too painful, that you'll never be able to put yourself together again. I was working with a client of mine yesterday through the mindfulness change, where we go through the timeline like this. And that was one of the voices of her child parts, was that she was the one that had to hold everything together in her family, right? Because there was nobody else to do it. So she took on that role, which then carried on in later life as this constant need to please and overgive, and she got burnt out and got really, really sick. And when she could see what that was, where she was being engaged with doing, and what was driving it, so the root cause of what was underneath, what she was afraid to get really vulnerable about, she could bring that fragmented piece, that child part, home and say, I've got this. You can rest now. Rest in me. So we're talking about this pressure to keep doing so much, and touching into that belief that so many of us have, that when we are not working hard, in some way we're falling short. And maybe that's the voice of your mother that you hear, that told you that if you just took a break, or you just had some downtime, that you were being lazy, right? So you were made wrong or shamed, that in order to be a good person or a productive member of society, you're not allowed to rest. It's deep in our culture. And in some way, it reflects badly on who we are, right? And how we are being with each other, let alone how we're being with nature, which is part of us, or with the animals and the insects and the plant life that are part of our true nature. And then you can start to see that there's going to always be a sense of feeling threatened, not feeling safe enough to pause. And often that in that place where you've built up heart walls that you have to defend. And a lot of times we see defense, right? Heart protection as lashing out or reacting in an aggressive, hurtful way, right? It's the opposite of mindful regard. And I mean, how many times have you regretted that maybe you didn't pause, rather than lashing out with a hurt comment? Remember, hurt people. And underneath hurt, what is it? Is it shame? Who are you being? And another great question is, how old is the part that is in reaction, that is angry, that is lashing out? because you'll find, and this is the transformational process of working with the mindfulness change process, is when you see which age you are, when you created that belief that there wasn't any other way than to be like that, you can see what's hijacking your limbic system isn't exactly what's happening in the event. Remember, trauma is never in the event. It's in the archives or the files of our experiences of the last time we were betrayed or hurt or shamed into being something that we were not. So I'm curious to know how many times, and I don't know why I'm not seeing the comments today, but how many times have you maybe regretted pushing the send button without even, and you'll know when it is, because it's so old, it's been with you for so long, that wounding, that you don't even know why all of a sudden you're triggered, right? And you're reacting, you're acting out of the hurt or the shame or the guilt about something that probably wasn't even yours in the first place. And we've all done it. I've been guilty of being caught in behaviors that, because I didn't push pause and come back to a more evolved sense of being, that I behaved in a way that I didn't feel very good about it many times. And I often see this too in addictive behaviors that we get caught in. Again, it's because we are afraid to push pause. And it's a very common one that most of the time it's that we will resist feeling, right? You have to feel in order to heal. And it's much easier to spiritually bypass that and go and eat a tub of ice cream, or, go and numb yourself out binge watching Netflix or something, or whatever it is. I mean, name your addiction. One of mine was always that perfectionistic streak of doing it again and again and again until it drove me crazy, rather than just showing up imperfectly and trusting that would be enough. So, the art of that sacred pause is a very valuable thing to do in your daily life. And it's not an either or. We need all of it. And it's incredibly powerful to be able to stop, to say, no, not right now. Or can I get back to you? Rather than overcommitting. We've got holidays coming up. And I know in America, you guys have got Thanksgiving coming up. How often do you actually allow yourself to push pause and just be still enough to appreciate, to give thanks for your life, for the people in your life, for the food on your table? And how often do we go into that addictive place of begrudgingly cooking dinner for 20 people, rather than stay in the appreciation of nurturing as an enjoyable process and giving thanks to the animals and the plant life and the farmers and the rain and the sun that grew that harvest that you have put on the table for others to share, in a place of being, in appreciation, of actually stopping to give thanks. So how we bring in our fear of not getting what we want to be, and our desire to achieve certain mind states, rather than pausing and arriving right there. There's a kind of leaning forward, of kind of grasping and judging and projecting, because we want it now. We don't want to wait. We don't want to be patient. And again, Medicine of Chameleon shows us how to delay instant gratification for a long-term sustainable future, not just a quick fix for now and then it's gone, right? The fleeting respite, so to speak. So what happens to hijack your limbic system? I'm really curious. What happens to you when you don't push pause? When you just get carried into the behaviors and you don't even know where it comes from because it's not even like you? And I think one of the places that it causes the most trouble is that rather than pausing, as I said, we have all these lifestyle habits these days that keep us distracted and immersed in mental preoccupation and working so hard and forcing and pushing when it's actually time not to force and push, is to recognize that that's not the time to be out. It's time to come in and strengthen yourself on the inside, to do the internal work, to shine light on the wounded parts of you, the shadow parts that are still wreaking havoc in your relationships, with your physical health, and in your business, and in your dealings with other people. So we don't just want to pause, because when we pause, a lot of times it's uncomfortable. And you might be feeling the anxiety of the moment internally, just as I'm talking about it. But does it make sense that when you pause and you really are in the presence of somebody else, eye to eye, skin to skin, human or animal, when you can see a felt sense of belonging to yourself, you can be that space for somebody else to rest in you until they can do it for themselves, without being in a meltdown that sets you off because fear comes up around, what is this person going to think of me, or seeing yourself as weak because you're resting there. How can you rest without an agenda? I'd love to know, because that's part of the great separation sickness, is we're pushing the very things that we need, which includes tribe. It includes eyes on you. Just like in a herd of horses, you see some of them sleep and some of them stand guard, and they take turns. You watch a flock of geese fly, in the V, and how they conserve energy by flying in the slipstream, and they all have a turn to take the lead so the others can rest. We don't have as much of that social or familial support that we used to, but it's still possible to look at, where are you draining your energy? Where do you need to rest into? Where can you just push pause and connect back with the heart of what you need and desire and require? Because I think we do spend time, a lot of time, we waste a lot of time when we are unable to pause with each other. And we can't pause with each other if we're not able to pause for ourselves. We have to keep our own appointments first, don't we? And then we can start to see how all the multitasking is affecting every other relationship, because you're not present to appreciate that in the moment. So we need to train ourselves to meditate, on the cushion. I feel like we need training to be with each other and stay present, not to go into our habitual strategies of jumping into fixing rather than holding space for somebody to feel and express what they need to feel. So how do we start to undo that? Because it's radical. This is radical sacred activism, because it means being vulnerable, being sovereign to yourself, being open to the possibility of loving without holding anything back. And pausing is the pathway. I really believe it is the power of the pause as this beautiful doorway to our potential in terms of full intelligence, full mutual cooperation and mindful regard and love. And I love, it's almost become my mantra. One of the great resilience teachers of all time, Viktor Frankl, says that between the space and the response, that there is a space, and in that space is your power and your freedom, and also your love and your wisdom. So how do you find the space if you're filling it up with needless, incessant tasks and doing rather than being? Well, you need to stop. You need to know how to stop. And sometimes I just say, stop to myself. I give myself a timeout. And it's a request more than it is a demand. It's an invitation to stay in the liminal space a little bit longer. Because we have, as I said earlier, we have such strong conditioning to keep going in our strategies, but we also have this capacity within us to pause. It starts with the power of choice, and the choice is yours and yours alone. Nobody can force you to pause. No one can force you to rest. If you are so addicted to your own self-importance, I'm so busy. And I think it's one of the big markers in our evolutionary unfolding, and it's a central theme in the mythology of Buddha. And I remember hearing a story, and I can't remember where I heard it, but I think it was Bodhisattva, I'm not sure. But he was sitting under the Bodhi tree seeking enlightenment and looking and forcing so many ways. And he got really, really sick after years and years and years of attempting to reach enlightenment. And he was emaciated and sick and close to death. And he said, there has got to be another way. Hands up if you've been asking, show me another way, please, universe. And he gets to this point where he's almost on death's door, and he has this vision of when he was a child, and he'd been brought to this annual celebration of the spring plowing and was sitting under a rose tree watching the older men plowing away. And he saw the oxen, straining to pull the plow and the cut grass and the freshly overturned soil. And he saw the eggs of the little insects, and he could see the insects dying, and he could see and feel the suffering, and that opened his heart to the suffering that all beings experience in this living, dying world. And in that open-hearted tenderness, he also saw the blue sky and the graceful soaring of the birds. And he smelled the scent of the cut grass and the rose trees. And he was elated and lifted up by the joy of that. And he was in that space of relaxing back when there was room for the 10,000 joys and the 10,000 sorrows. And he touched a real experience of freedom. Just that open presence. That's the freedom to come home to our hearts. And it doesn't happen because we're striving really hard to get somewhere. It happens in the moments when we pause, when we recognize that we are part of oneness, that we are whole beings, that we are interconnected with the universe. So what do you need to stop the busyness and be able to give yourself permission to push pause on the world? Stop trying to control things that are not yours to control. And to ask how you could sit, right? And just pause with the people that you love. And I'm just watching my time. But I think I'll leave it there for today. But I want you to just notice, how can you intentionally step out of all the automatic or habitual doing and coping mechanisms and distractions and resistance to living fully engaged in the experience of what matters and moves you? How can you be in that space to just relax back into that non-doing presence? Rather than getting lost in thoughts that are trying to get you somewhere or figure something out, or that obsessive compulsive worry addiction Mobius strip that you're on and you can't get off. So play with the experiment. Just push pause. Start with 20-second increments of just being and noticing your breath, because it's going to build that muscle of pausing. And when you will, because you will get lost in the doing, recognize it, relax, open, push pause again, and arrive there. Notice your breath, notice your beating heart, whatever it is for you. I feel the power of breath is so underrated. But just taking 3 full breaths, very long in breath, and a very slow out breath is going to help relax the sympathetic nervous system and help you to come down off this chaotic on all the time. And then just pay attention to waking up your senses so that you know you are here, occupying the space of the pause. Knowing that you're listening to sounds, the forms that you are seeing right here, and the sensations that you're sensing in your body. 3 breaths, open up your senses, the power of 3. And then with compassion and patience and kindness, invite yourself to stay here. That's it. And I think it's in its simplicity that a lot of people don't even try to connect with the breath. But start there and see what changes, and see how you are able to hold that pause in situations with other people that trigger you into reacting rather than pausing and responding in a kind way later. It's a beautiful thing. And I get that it's much more challenging when you're in the midst of something with another person that is pushing your buttons. So I'd like to just invite you to experiment right now and give yourself a chance to bring the pause, invite it in to a situation where you do get stirred up once you've practiced that power of pause in a relaxed space, and see how you feel. Not doing anything, simply being. And notice where you're going to misidentify that relaxation as I'm tired, I'm exhausted, because some of you are so highly wound up that when your body finally gets that big exhale, that relaxation, that pause space, it may be unsettling for you as those senses start to wake up, and you might bring to mind a situation where you're pretty regularly getting caught in some level of reactivity, where you act in ways that don't express the most mature awake part of your being. So let yourself remember that as if you're watching it play out on a movie screen as the observer, the quiet observer. There's nothing to do here. There's nothing to prove. Just sense what's going on that's really triggering you. And just pause at the key frame right before you have reacted fully. Push pause when you wish you could have pushed pause. And then go ahead and take those breaths right now. Nice full in breaths and a nice slow out breath. And again and again and again. Let your senses awaken and take a moment to really pause and inhabit and experience the vulnerability of whatever is being triggered in you, rather than running away from it, running from it. Run toward it. Run toward the pause. Sit down into what it is here with a relaxed and gentle attention. And just notice, this isn't feeling good, but I can be with this. It's not going to kill you. I'm okay. Just give it the gentleness of the attention that's being asked for. I remember hearing a story once about a little 4-year-old that went to sit on the porch with an old man who'd just lost his wife. And he noticed the man crying, and he went into his yard and climbed in his lap and just sat there. And when the child came home, his mother asked, "What did you say to the man?" And he said, "I didn't say anything, Mommy. I just helped him to cry." What a beautiful gift to just be able to hold that space of the pause for people to get in touch with what really needs to be expressed. It is the frequency of love, that non-doing presence, because that's when you're inhabiting who you really are. So I have 1 minute before my client, so I'm going to leave it there. But I hope that this resonated with you today. I hope just listening to my voice has allowed you to slow down a little bit and tap into your body and really come home into being and get excited about the fact that you're going to keep an appointment to push pause for 20 seconds, however many times you choose during the day. Right here, right now, just saying, I'm going to push pause. Take a moment. Just stop and come home to your heart. And you don't have to try to be aware. The awareness is what you are. And pausing is just relaxing back into occupying the space of your heart, right? That inner chamber of Om. So natural. And when you do that, the mind leaves the pause and goes into activity. And so our practice is just to notice that. Notice and relax, reorient, settle back again. This is what I teach in the trust process, and it's powerful. It's not a radical thing to just have the intention to keep relaxing back, not doing anything, not controlling anything. It is dreaming your life into being, awake, eyes wide open, senses wide open, being in a space of non-doing, that you're going to get the awarenesses and the insights and the nuggets that you need to carry with you so that you can do better and you can be the highest version of yourself. That's how you get to show up and make a positive impact in the world. And you're going to get what you need from the wisdom and the sacredness of the pause. I love you. Have a good rest of your evening wherever you are. And if you like this, please comment, share what comes up with you, and share it with other people in your life that are running around like headless chickens, and invite them to practice that sacred pause with you. And let me know how it goes. Bye.